Okay, greetings everybody that's here. I'm glad to see, I think I remember most of you from the last time we had a meeting here. Anyways, for you that don't know me, my name is Eunice Davidson. I'm from North Dakota. I'm from the Spirit Lake Reservation in North Dakota. I'm a full-blood Dakota Sioux. I'm enrolled with our tribe. I grew up and went to school on the reservation. I got married, we got married. We've been married, me and my husband have been married 51 years this last July. We have 2 children and 3 grandchildren and 1 great-granddaughter. And both of our kids are very active on the reservation yet. My daughter is an entrepreneur, they have a restaurant. My son is a school teacher at Four Winds Community High School. And we have a really busy family. After we raised our kids, I went back to school. I graduated from our local college, Champaign, which means Little Hoop. I graduated there with a Dakota Studies degree and a liberal arts degree. And then I went on to Fort Berthold Community College because I wanted to study more about Native Americans, ethnobotany, and that sort of thing. So I went to school there for a year to college, and then I went on to Black Hills State University, and I graduated with a BA degree in education. So I've had my rounds, and now I'm with NAGA. And I started with NAGA in 2014, but really it started before that with the Fighting Sioux name and image at the University of North Dakota. We had a gentleman by the name of John Chasky. He's an elder gentleman from our reservation, and we, like you folks, I think probably here in 2006, we started hearing on the radio that if our 2 tribes in North Dakota didn't have a vote, we were going to have to retire the Sioux name. And I worked on the reservation. We had a little grocery store at the time, and people were coming in, and our Indian people coming in, and they're asking all of us, "Who's saying that? How come we have to get rid of the name if we don't have a vote?" And you know, some of the elders said, "We already gave the okay in 2000 with the resolution to keep the name." And some of the elders said, you know, in 1969, our elders went to university and they actually gave a naming ceremony with President Starcher. They gave up the name and to use forever in exchange for education. So with all that being said, we were still curious why they were doing that. So one day, John Chasky called me and asked me if I would be on his committee. He had just started to figure out what we should do. And so I said, absolutely I will. And in the process, we ended up calling the university and talking to one of the officials and asking him what we needed to do. And he said, you need to vote, both tribes, Standing Rock and your tribe. And we said, okay. So then they asked us to come to the university, and they asked us if we would come and tour the campus. So we got about 20 of us together, and we went there, and they gave us a tour, and they everywhere we went to university, everybody was really, really nice to us. You know, shook our hands, and they fed us, and we joked. Of course, Indians really like to joke around about a lot of things all the time. So, you know, we had a lot of fun with the staff that were giving us a tour. Well, the last place they wanted to take us was to the Native American Center. And we were all kind of enthused, you know, we thought, wow, that'll be good. So when we got there, we saw there were about 11 students sitting around waiting for us, and they were Native American. So we introduced ourselves and we shook hands like we normally do with each other. And the first thing one of their students asked us, they said, "We hear you guys are here for the Fighting Sioux name. You guys support that?" And we said, "Yeah, we do." We said, "Why don't you?" And they said, "No, if you went to school here, you wouldn't support it either." So some of our members, my son was along, and he asked them, he said, "Well, what's wrong with it? Why don't you support it?" And they said, "Well, because they're always after us. Everyone's harassing us all the time." And my son said, "Like what? What do you mean harassing you? I mean, are they calling you names or what?" And he said, "Well, no, they're just asking us if we like the Sioux name or not." And my son said, "Well, do you answer them or what?" And the one guy said, well, no, he said, we just don't like it here. My son said, you know, he said, I thought that you're going to school here. He said, how many of you have gone here for 2 or 3 years? And a couple of them raised their hand. And he said, well, if you don't like it, why do you go to school here? You can go somewhere else. And by the time we left, we got in a really discussion with them. And out of all those 11 students, only one was part Sioux. The rest were all Arikara, Mandan, Hidatsa, Chippewa. None of them were Sioux. We kind of found that kind of funny. We said, you know, well, why? You know, well, anyway, we left there. We were really disgusted with that place. And we were to find out later on that that place is where they were having students go that didn't support the Sioux name. And if Native Americans supported the Sioux name, like one of my cousins that went there, they didn't help you. They wouldn't help you. So that's kind of how we found out about what was going on at the university. And in time, we ended up having a vote on our reservation, our 20-member committee organized, and we did a petition because we knew our tribal chairwoman would not want to have a vote on it because she didn't support names and images. She said, I don't support names and images, but I don't speak for the people. So we went ahead and we did a petition to force her to put it on the ballot so we could vote. We had to do that. And we did. We got the names that we needed. I think it was close to 300. We got it within 3 nights. I mean, none of us got paid. We went around in 20 below weather, freezing, and did this petition signing after we got done work every day. And when we did get it on the ballot to vote on, we had the opposition. We had university professors and staff coming on our reservation, putting on feeds for people to come there and listen to them, and they would tell them why they should not support the Sioux name. And this went on the week before we had our election. And we even had, I think probably, we can't prove this, but we think that the law school probably even helped a couple of them that were in opposition to the name to say our petitions were fraud, that they wanted to have that petitions looked at. So we ended up having to go to court, to our tribal court. They got a different judge to look at it, looked at the case. They had our election committee come on board and look at all the names, and when they come out, they said only 5 names were not able to vote on the reservation because they didn't live there, but they were enrolled members. So anyway, we went ahead with the vote, and I think everybody knows 67% of our people voted, and the largest vote out ever on our reservation. We usually have about 1,200 people that can vote, and that's what voted that day. And it was because of the Sioux name. They wanted to keep it. So, you know, I tell you this because I want you to know that the Indian people, everywhere I've gone and everyone I've talked to on reservations, support some kind of a native theme, like it's the U of I here. They want to see something. They don't want to see these names and images go. They're very much in support of it. So anyway, but we're just supposed to introduce ourselves. I'll let Breland introduce herself, and then I'll come back and talk a little more with you.
Come on in, Amy. I think I know everyone in the room or close to it. I'm Breland Pay. I joined Honor the Chief Society and then walked in the homecoming parade and got attacked and got pissed off and started speaking before the student government, and when they laughed at me and ignored me, I kept coming back and 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 irritating them, and when that didn't get me anywhere, I went to the teacher senate and started going back to them until they kept trying to vote me out of my right to speak. So then I show up to, I think you and I both showed up to the chancellor's speech where he was talking about what we could wear and what we couldn't wear, and just stood there like this through the last half of his speech and didn't break eye contact with him. Nobody applauded for that speech. Nobody moved, nobody asked questions, and that speech was dead. all it takes is for us to stand up and push a little back, you know, write some letters, make some phone calls. Yeah, and then just started speaking for the, in front of the Board of Trustees, you know, joined NAGA in February. They literally came through town and snatched me up. It was like pack in 6 hours, we're going to Cincinnati. And then after that it was pack in 7 or 8 hours, we're going to DC and Maine, and I've been speaking across the country with them, and I find, you know, these broken communities, and they're exactly like everybody I'm looking at. The same problems, the same people, the same kids, the same fears, the same highs, you know. And what we want to do definitely as NAGA is reach out and connect everybody so we're all on the same mission to preserve Native imagery and educate, you know, not eradicate.
Thanks, Bree. I'm gonna hold this far away. I've got a loud speaking voice, so I don't know if I need the microphone. I think most of the people in the room are probably know me in some capacity, but for those that are watching on Facebook Live, or for those of you who haven't heard my full backstory, I'll go into a little bit of detail. My name's Ivan Dozier, and currently I serve as the president of the Honor the Chief Society here in Champaign, and I've also contributed to NAGA as a regional director. My story goes way back, being of mixed race myself and being born and raised in Illinois. I always had a very close personal connection with the Chief Lionwhite tradition and what they were doing here at the U of I to honor our Native American heritage and history. It was always something that we were very proud of in my family and in my community. You know, even when you look at, you know, the Marvel superheroes, you don't get a lot of representation for Native American people. We simply aren't put in the spotlight very often, and that's not hard to recognize in a community like Illinois, where we've had a lot of places that are named after Native tribes, but we don't have any current tribal lands within state borders right now. And so it's hard for a lot of people to be able to have those windows to reach out and ask questions about Native history. And if they don't know that Native people can be credited with names like Kaskaskia and Peoria and Cahokia, places that we drive through every day or that we see every day, if they don't know about that connection to Native people, then they might never ask those questions. And so Chief Lionwhite was always an excellent resource to get people to start asking those questions, and really made a very positive impact. That being said, not everyone saw it that way. And even during my time in high school, before I was even a student at the university, my cousin, who was a member of the Community Native American House on campus, he was actually one of the protesters against the Chief Lionwhite tradition and the name Fighting Illini. And I didn't really understand his perspective. When he was growing up, he had always supported the chief. But when he came to campus and got involved with the Native American House and interacted with some of his peers who weren't from the Illinois community, it gave him a bit of a different perspective, and he kind of had a paradigm shift for how he thought about Native names and images. And there were a lot of late nights at the kitchen at my parents' house of him talking with my dad and just trying to hash out the details of how Native imagery affected his view, how Native imagery affected our view, and really trying to give a deep dive. And that's a perspective that I grew up with, was hearing both sides of the issue and really hearing some of these different perspectives gone back and forth, really getting to the core of the issue. And that's something that hasn't happened here in Champaign and never happened in North Dakota, which is strange that we're at these institutions of higher learning, yet we're strangely absent when it comes to debate. It's strangely absent when it comes to intelligent discourse. It seems like the tactics used to get rid of Native names and images always come down to supplying a heavy dose of misinformation and then escalating to violence if you don't accept that misinformation, and then ultimately just shutting down the discussion altogether. So I'll talk about that whenever the microphone comes back my way again, of how these tactics have been used here in Champaign and how those same tactics have been used nationwide. when you hear of the stories of all of us here in the panel, you'll notice that there's some very common themes. And so hopefully we'll be able to pick those apart a little bit. We'll be able to recognize those signs, and we'll be able to figure out how we can work together and how we can kind of expand our audience a little bit to address some of these, so we can band together and kind of stop what's going on in our country right now.
My name is Tony Henson. I'm from BMed. Never went to the U of I. I'm in that group of probably the largest stakeholder, fan, who, although we think it's wonderful that the University of Illinois is a great institution of higher learning, all we really care about is the football team any good, and the men's basketball team, and the traditions. So I kind of consider myself the Admiral Stockdale of this movement. Who am I? Why am I here? Well, having no connection to the university or anything, I'm just a guy that goes to the games and feels the same pain that you feel at halftime. When it used to be an event, it used to be thrilling, and now it's more like a funeral. It's just, you reminisce. So in 2015, I was in a horrific car accident, and I was laid up for a couple months, and I had to do something. So I decided, well, what can I do with my time? I know, I'll solve the Chief Wanaway problem. So where do you begin? I began on an odyssey that started with just some ideas in my head, and we've progressed to a point where we've gotten a lot of key players on board, and I think that we're poised to actually win. I don't like moral victories. I like to win, and that's what we're talking about doing. So when it comes to my turn, I guess that's what we'll talk about moving forward. So.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to start out with, I was in Washington, D.C. this week. We had a meeting with a big group who I think really supports NAGA and is going to help us. First of all, we want to bring a lawsuit against the NCAA. They have that policy that discrimination against Native Americans. It's the only group of people that they have a policy against. It's not the whole delegation of colleges, it's a 20 executive committee member that has that policy. And anyway, when I was in DC this week, and I noticed something that's kind of going on here. We went into one of the museums there, and they had a museum set up of the women's suffrage and how they fought to get votes and fought for the women's rights and everything. And it was a really nice display. And being a Native American, whenever I go into any place, I always look to see what they have about the Native Americans. And they only had a picture of one lady and a Ojibwe or Chippewa that fought for some voting rights for the Native American women. That made me really sad that that's all they had. And then when we were, my husband smokes, and he was outside smoking outside our hotel, and I sat with him. We had just came back from a tour. And there was a lady sitting there, a black lady. She was really nice, and we started talking. And she said, she asked me where I was from, of course, and I asked her, and we had struck up a conversation. And she said, she said, we've been touring, me and her friend. She said, she said, what happened to the Native Americans? And I looked at her and I thought, exactly. That's what's going on with this movement to get rid of us. First you get rid of any name or any picture, and then pretty soon everything starts to deteriorate and you're gone. And we are the smallest minority. And I think about that, the NCAA policy. They call it hostile and abusive to use our names and images. Well, I think they are the hostile and abusives. We were, like Breland said, when we started out in January, we got a gift from a donor who donated quite a bit of money for us to get out and get known, because she really believes in what we're doing. And we asked this Oxford group, I don't know what you call them, the Not Your Mascot movement, or there's some Native Americans in there, and they're up in Ohio. And we asked them if we could have a discussion in, where was that at? Talawanda Braves? Yeah, for the Talawanda Braves. And it took them a while to answer us, but they did. And when we arrived there that evening, they arrived there, and half of their college of professors showed up with them. And we tried to have a civil discussion with them, but right away they went after attacking one of our members. They attacked us. They told us that everything we said were lies and distortions. We couldn't even talk because they were yelling. At one point I got so upset I asked that one gal to please shut up and let us have a little conversation with them. And she did to a certain point. But we never could have anything with them because they just absolutely would not listen and try to even, we were open-minded to what they were going to say, but they wouldn't even allow us to talk. That's how they are. So if anything come out of that meeting that night, it was people saw the difference between our group and what their group was like. And very, just vicious. But the reason I tell you that story is when we got done that night, I was packing up some of our stuff, and there were like about 3 professors, older non-native women sitting in the back, and the one said it loud enough, I'm sure, for me to hear it. She said, she said, if those people were educated, they wouldn't be here talking just about these names and images, about saving them. And I turned around and I looked at her, I said, who are you talking about? And I went over there, I said, and she said, well, that name just, draws racism. And I looked at her, and she was talking about Talawanda Braves or the Redskins or whatever, and I went over and I said, I have been called racist by people like you. I said, I am an Indian trying to save our identities and our heritage and our history. I said, anyone's racist, I said, you are. I said, you tell me who's the racist one, who's the bigot. I got so upset. I usually don't say anything like that, but I just got so upset with what they said to me. So anyway, the one lady said, you can't call me that. And I said, why not? I said, you call me that. And she said, that really hurts. And I said, well, good, then you know how I feel. But that's kind of what the people that we're dealing with, is these type of people. I know you guys have read about some of the stuff that happened with Breland, with Alex. Yeah, Rosenstein, some of these professors, Kaufman, I read that about Kaufman. I got so upset I wrote this letter to the NCAA about what the letter they wrote to them. I think some of you might have read it, I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. We have, when we go on the road, we all bring our message of what we want to talk about. And we bring nothing but facts with us when we go. And I think that's probably why we get attacked so bad, because they can't attack our message, so they attack us personally. And it's really sad that has to happen in this country. And it's going to get like that quite way with anything, just about, frankly. So anyway, when I think about these, what we have researched, what we found, since 1996, they have done polls. The Washington Post did a poll back in 1996 where 90% of Native Americans that were called or they were spoken to, they had no problem with the Redskins name or any of these names or any of the images or anything. Sports Illustrated did one in 2002, and over 80% of Native Americans supported the same thing, keeping these names and images. The Annenberg was done in 2004, 90%. And these are facts, you can find them. ESPN and USA did another one in 2013, and that came out 79%. The Washington Post again did another one in 2016, and that was 91%, and gained 1% more. And just the other day, the Washington Post did another one. They didn't give any percentages, but they asked one question: if you had to describe the Redskins, what would it be? And proud was what most of them, the majority of them said. So this movement is really out to get rid of the Redskins name because they were taken to court by Susan Harjo, who first brought the first lawsuit against the NFL team. And I talked to some of the people at the Redskins. I've talked with them. I've been there, and they said when that lawsuit was brought against a trademark, their trademark. They try to take the trademark down. They start putting out where this image came from, where the name came from. And there was a fellow by the name of Native American by the name of Lone Star Dietz back in the 1920s or 30s, that he was coached by George, what was his name?
Pop Warner.
Who?
Pop Warner.
Oh, Pop Warner, yeah. But anyway, Lone Star Dietz was a Lakota, and he really wanted them to, he said, if you're gonna have an Indian team, we need to have a name, a regular Indian name. So he said, why not use Redskins? So that's where the name Redskins come from. That's why our Indian people are so proud, because that's part of our culture. We love that. It makes us feel good when we see white people using our names or our images. It makes us feel like we're welcome and like we're home. It does. Many say that around the country that I've talked to, many Native Americans. But then time went on, and there was a Blackfoot man by the name of Blackie Wetzel. And he went to Washington, D.C., and he said, if you're going to use the Redskins name, he said, you need to have a decent image. He said, rather than just the R that they used. So he said, if we come up with something from the Blackfeet, he said, will you use it? And the owner said, yeah, show us. So he went back, and they had an artist use Chief Whitecalf. I think you've seen Chief Whitecalf. I think he was on many of the coins that have been made, his profile. That was their chief, and that's what they drew, and they used, and they took it back to the Washington Redskins, and they agreed to use it. So that was done, that's where that logo came from. So that was done by Native Americans, and that's another reason why we're so proud to have it. It's because we've had some input into that. So I think, anytime you do anything, and the more Native people you can have involved, with some of this stuff, that's where you're going to really find the power to keep it. People are going to speak up for that, the Indian people. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you that, that's kind of where a lot of that, the movement has come from to get rid of us, is a distortion of lies that they're telling about us. Right now, the only avenue we have, any kind of media, is social media. We don't have the media on our side. Absolutely not. They won't print anything for us. We even sent the letter I wrote to the NCAA to have them read it. You'll never see them print that. We've had some of the folks in Illinois trying to get it put in the paper in the Chicago and around here, and they won't put that letter in. So, we're being really shut out for our speech, for everything that, we believe in, and it's really sad that that's happening today. But anyway, besides that, I want to tell you that we have traveled all over the United States with the gift we got this year. And every community we've gone to have been non-Native communities. And when we show up and we show them what we have, we do these presentations, we talk about why we're proud to have it. And when we show up, it's normally so many different types of Indians. We have Navajo, we have Sioux, we have Apache, Comanche, Cherokee. So, they see it as a variety of us that does support this. And like I've said, every community we've gone to, we have probably about 90% of the community support. And we ask them to save their name. But again, they have this board, these school boards. And like we just came from Driggs for the Redskins name, we were there, and Driggs, Idaho. And the whole community wanted that name, Redskin name saved, but they call move-ins. 2 move-ins that moved into their community got on the board, and they got another one to go along with them, and they changed the Redskins name. And it's really sad how this is happening all over with these school boards. And I don't know about I don't know if you have a Native American Center at Illinois here. You do? There's no support there, I'm sure.
Well, I'm not allowed in there anymore.
Oh my God. It just is it's so maddening. But yeah, I wanted to tell you about that, what we have been finding this year. We have been traveling. Another thing that happened this year, when we went to Maine, Skowhegan Indians was the last high school, public high school, that had an Indian name and image, and their board voted to get rid of it. But we call them the movement, they went one step further and they passed a law with their legislators to not ever use a name and image in their state again in a public entity. Now Massachusetts is looking at doing it. Idaho, the Champaign tribe wants Idaho to do it. So I've been calling and I've been on the phone. One week I was on the phone, I think probably about 16 hours per day, talking with legislators around the country. We have a lot of legislators who want to do something, who want to get together and they want to stop this. And I talked with Chad from Idaho, and I said, Chad, I said, I really think that rather than just stopping it from the Native Americans, we need to stop it from everybody. We need to make a law that says you cannot go after any one culture at any time for anything, because that's what they're going to do. It's whatever this movement is, it's to get rid of everything. So anyway, but I wanted my husband to come up here and talk to you a little bit about. He had talked to Tony and was telling Tony some things about the professors. That he does a lot of my research, and the book I wrote, he did a lot of my research for me. We wrote the book together, and it was very interesting. But I'll have David say a few words. Well, just grab a chair, David. Just grab a chair. Oh.
Well, I guess I'm gonna start by, I come from a different angle than these guys. I'm not Native American. But we've all heard that saying that there's a certain part of a person, like opinions, there's a certain part of the body that everyone has one, but some of them are better than others. And another saying is, united we stand, divided we fall. Well, for the NCAA, the first thing you need to know, the NCAA does not have a policy. You can go through the whole manual, and I have dozens of times. You will not find one word in there about Native names and images. There is no policy. There is a 20 executive committee policy, but they did not get it adopted properly, because the first thing is that it is discrimination. There's just no two ways about it. And any university that were to vote to accept that policy would be risking their 501c3 and federal funding. That's why they have not. They have not produced it to the 1,281 colleges, because it cannot be voted on. If they were to do it, they've got to rewrite the whole NCAA constitution. So that's not an opinion, that's a fact. And another thing, like I was telling Tony, this whole thing started in 1996 when the Supreme Court revamped the Title IX. And the NCAA then adopted a committee for gender and diversity to go along with their already minority of opportunities of interest committee. And each university has a minority of opportunities and interest committee. And hand in hand from 1996, these small little groups on the universities worked with the NCAA to create a fictional justification for the policy. But in 2005, they even came out and said they have no authority to have any university change their name or any policy against what the university does. So the bottom line is there is no NCAA policy. And they have just got their justification from, like your Rosenstein here. He indoctrinated Charlene Peters and then did video that he's making money off because they're using it at the university. But he indoctrinated an Indian because he couldn't get the job done himself. He needed to have an Indian. Same with the Freiburg study. They needed an Indian. These people, these professors in the psychology department, they've been at this for years, but they really got active in 1996, and then they started creating all this false information. And we have the ones in University of North Dakota. But these are the ones that the NCAA works with. They don't work with the rest of the university. In fact, in 2005, the NCAA requires each university to give the self-evaluation of their campus. Well, in UND's case, they went to because they didn't like what the university sent in, the honest one, they went to the opposition and had them give them an evaluation of the university. So they're building all their cases on a handful of people that they've been talking to. And they've indoctrinated enough Native Americans that they put them out in front. But there is no policy, and that's what NAGA really wants to go and get that policy removed, and then every university can go back to doing what they were doing before this. So, but until that policy is gone, the universities, the psychological departments, the human interests or humanities department, they are running the colleges. They are destroying your athletics intentionally. They don't like athletics because it doesn't fit into their agenda. So, the last time I rambled on, and I'm not going to ramble on today, but that's the whole thing that I want to get to you. There is no NCAA policy. You will not find it, no matter how much you look through the Constitution, which is over 400 pages, and then you go through their manual, that's 800 pages, but you will not find one thing on names and images of any kind. So, I don't know if I filled in what you wanted.
Thank you. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is where all this racist BS came from, because I'm sure you're all sick to death of being called racist and hearing, seeing Jay's little thing, oh, this is racist, stop it, and this is racist, that is racist, everybody's a racist. Well, I did some more research actually today. I read a 108-page dissertation from one Miss Stephanie Freiberg, and learned some extra things today that ticked me off. So you get the extra treatment tonight. Okay, so and anybody who's not familiar with Stephanie Freiberg, she's the one that came out with a research study that pretty much proved that it was racist and hostile and abusive to have mascots, and she used the term mascots in her research, to represent Native Americans, and that's how all Native Americans felt. Basically a blanket statement that was not peer-reviewed, and the APA picked that up, ran with it, said, we're putting a ban, we're saying, yes, this is hostile and abusive because she's a psychology, she has her degree and everything. This is research-based, we've looked at this. And the president, who was only the president for a year, was not board-certified psychologist at the time. So he was back in 75, and that had long since expired by 2005, and then he wasn't again until 2008. So in between that time, he was, I don't want to say just a professor, because a professor is a fine job to have, and teachers, a good job to have, but no, he was not a practicing psychologist at that time. To be president of the APA, that's kind of a, maybe you should be a little more up on your licensing. But to go back, what I found today is in that research, that 2005 research, is nothing more than her 2003 dissertation, just kind of amped up and slid in as research and called like, it's like writing a paper and then saying this is law. You know, she fudged a lot of things. Firstly, her news references that she pulled for this dissertation that she wrote in 2003. She took news references to Native Americans from, let's see, here it is, 1997. That was the year that she chose to write her 2003 paper on, and went back to 1997 to get Native American references, only from the New York Times. Wait, did I get that right? I was scribbling today because I was just everywhere. The New York Times and the LA Times, that's it. Pulled articles from those two papers from 1997. And then movies from 1990 to 2000. You know, granted this is 2003, so that's kind of, you know, relevant. But to still be referencing this old stuff today and standing on it, like when you see Jay's post and said the NCAI, yeah, and the APA and everything, that's what they're all referencing. All this comes back to this Freiberg report, which is just the Freiberg dissertation, where she went to these the first study she went to a junior high and a high school on an Indian reservation in Arizona. 71 kids. Their average age was 16.4 years, and she showed them pictures of Chief Wahoo, Disney's Pocahontas, and then some negative stereotypes of Native Americans. And she led with, oh my God, you guys are gonna love this. Like Chief Wahoo, most people know very little about most people know very little about American Indians beyond the mascot images portrayed in newspapers and on television. Chief Wahoo, the Redskins, the Braves, and the Tomahawk Chop are examples of how American Indians are portrayed around the country. We hope to portray American Indians as they really are today. That doesn't really sound like research questions to me. That sounds like she's leading for an answer. I don't appreciate that in the name of science, in the name of getting a fair answer out of people, and getting a fair answer out of a median age of 16.4 years, and then giving them a self-esteem test after. She was giving pictures of Pocahontas to 16-year-old girls and then asking them questions about their weight and self-esteem. Okay, I'm gonna look at a picture of Pocahontas and I'm gonna have weight issues. You know, and I'm almost 43 years old. So imagine how these Native girls, and they were all on a reservation, are looking at this glamorized Disney version, and she wants to ride this, you know, and all these detractors and not your mascot people are still riding this little piece of research and saying, oh no, these people speak for all natives, and they speak for me, and I'm not your mascot. Well, no, Pocahontas isn't a mascot. No. We have authentic Native imagery. We have blended culture. We have a marriage of culture out there, you know? Another one she did, the median age was 15.8 years. It was 146 in an American Indian high school. Same pictures, same leading questions. She did this 3 times with different groups, and then slid in Chief Illiniwek's picture and the Haskell Indian picture, and asked about sports mascots' influence on non-American Indians and how that made them feel as a part of a community. And I've got all of like the pictures and screenshots and actual like survey questions that she gave these people, and they're so leading. Like you're gonna throw a caricature in somebody's face and then say, how do you feel? She knew what answer she was gonna get, and then she peddled it off to the APA, and they picked it up, and then the NCAI picked it up, and then the NCAA picked it up. This is the only research I can find on how racist it is, but it's been cited over 1,400 times. People are still holding on to this which is from 2003. You know what? Saying that this is relevant, that natives are only relevant in newspapers and movies, it's crud now. You know, it's come out since 2003. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Vine, Snapchat, Reddit. You can find out all kinds of things about Native Americans. It's not just newspapers and movies where you're getting your information. So this is just bunk, you know, and when people call you a racist, that's what they're referring to, is everybody refers back to this stinking research. It all goes back, and I've looked at all these psychology papers, and you know, they'll even the statement they put out, it also say research has shown that the continued use of American Indian mascot symbols, images, and personalities has a negative effect on not only American Indian students but all students. And they'll go on, and they credit Stephanie Freiberg. And then if they go on to say anything else, they'll say, we know from literature, or we've seen in the past. They never say research has proven. And those words are important. Research has proven, because there is no research that has proven. They've speculated. Her fourth study was done at Stanford University, where the median age was 20.2 years. European Americans, undergrads, 137 of them, showed them Chief Wahoo, Pocahontas, and negative stereotypes where they were reading about sports or movies, and picked which article, and one was kind of peppered with native words and things that would make you think of native stuff, and the other one was kind of devoid of those imagery words. And then they picked which one they liked best, and then they took a self-esteem test. And she speculated from the results of that white Europeans were racist because they scored higher on their self-esteem test than natives did when they were given the slanted questions. It wasn't even the same. It wasn't even the same experimentation. It was a completely different study.
What was the result in percentage?
Pardon?
What was the result of the white Europeans or whatever? What was the result of that study? And what did they say percentage-wise?
How many?
Yeah.
Oh, I can look that up for you. I don't have it written here. Yeah, I can.
You know what I mean?
Seems like
When
it
they
might
said,
be
you
on
know, so many kids.
Yeah, it was. She did it more in a bar graph, and I can pull up the bar graph for you. In fact,
We have like a little panel or something after everyone's.
I do. I need to get like a slideshow, but I just pulled up all this dissertation.
Okay, that's
For
fine.
the non-Indians,
Okay.
it stayed just about the same, just went up, their self-esteem went up.
Yeah, their self-esteem, you know,
For the
was way
Native
higher than.
Americans that were showing all negative, it dropped.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so she gleaned from that white people are racist, and went with that narrative.
This is so wrong.
It is. That's why I'm telling you guys. Now you guys know. So when somebody says, oh, hey, you know, this is Indians, Redskins, Chief.
She doesn't understand what the Europeans and other people think about Indians here. She doesn't understand.
I know.
We know that.
She wanted to change the narrative of a country, and that's what she's doing. And that's what we're trying to stop. We're trying to educate. That's why I pulled all this apart and showed it's not scientifically sound, which is why it's not peer reviewed. You know, they slipped it through the APA, and everybody just ran with it. And the longer we stay silent and take those, oh, you're a racist, and not say back, no, I'm not, and this is why. That's the part that's important. This is why. We have facts. Be like, this is crud, and this is why. You have your facts wrong, and we've all been snowed. You know, I didn't know until I started researching. But yeah, it's all here. And even she came out with a modified study in 2008 that went on to say, she started backpedaling a little bit and made the difference between mascot and symbol, which should be pretty obvious to everybody, but people need educated.
She also concluded that maybe more information about.
Yeah, I was just getting to that.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So in her 2008, her two solutions were eradicate it all or saturate it with more native imagery, more and positive, authentic native imagery to bring more, what am I trying to say? So that natives can see themselves as more than just warriors or princesses, which for us, it's a blending of cultures or compromise. There are some things that some schools have to give up of their old traditions, like maybe the Plains headgear, because it didn't fit with the local tribe, and the local tribe would come in and consult on that, and there's compromises to be made to move forward. Because just like the Freiburg report, and Freiburg is from 2003, and it's outdated, and it needs to be held accountable. And you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just like it's outdated, and it needs to be out there and examined and fixed what's wrong. Some of these communities, maybe they have a couple things wrong. That doesn't mean trash it. It absolutely does not mean trash it. It means fix, tweak, and then go forward as a blended community where everybody can be happy, because nobody is going to be happy with eradication. Okay, I can think of two people, but seriously, nobody's happy with eradication. Everybody would rather see native imagery. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what we're fighting for, because if we don't, it is gone. And once it is gone, it doesn't come back. If you let it slip away, it's gone. If you don't fight for it, if you don't speak for it, if you don't live for it, if you don't love it, it is gone. We'll have facts on the website, and I'll try to, I think we have some now, but we're in transition on the NAGA website to an upgraded site. I think that's about all I had to say. If you have any questions on the Freiburg mess, I am your girl. I sleep with this thing under my pillow because I cannot stand that you are called racists. It burns me up every day. Yes?
Do you guys have like a white pages type thing on the Facebook, on your website for people to reference as far as these are the arguments, this is...
Oh, like an FAQ?
Yeah, or if it's this is their main argument and this is why they're wrong kind of thing.
We can put one up.
I mean, it'd be a good reference for the people that get into
More bite
a
size.
discussion. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one on the Honor the Chief website that you can check out. There's an FAQ section. It's a little more specific to the Chief of Illinois tradition rather than names and images as a whole. But a lot of it's thematically similar, and that's actually what I'm going to talk about here. Just
Yeah. Well, right. Good. I think we're done.
Okay. Well, that's
I'll
it.
interrupt you if I'm not.
That's an excellent transition point. No, it's, I mean, honestly, Bree unpacked a lot of good information there, and it's a lot of information that people don't know about. You want
Can I
to
say
mention
that?
that?
Can I no? Let me say that real quick. I'm sorry. Like, I wrote this to the side. On page 56 of her dissertation, she actually mentions Charlene Teeters. So there's a connection there. Yeah, I know you'd get that. Yeah, she actually mentions Charlene Teeters in her dissertation.
It looks like on page 1 there, she mentions Chief Illinois appearing in the opening paragraph and then nowhere else throughout the entire study. Not using it for the actual study, but using it as a reference.
3 and 4.
I've seen. But no, the real question comes into, why does that work? Why does putting out a dissertation that's chock full of opinion and then having everyone go back and cite that consistently, why do it? And it's one of these things, you hear the term fake news. Why does it work? Why is that an issue? How come people feel the need to tell you, oh, well, this is fake, don't click on it, that's just clickbait, there's no information there? It's because it works. And it works because it misleads people. It confuses people. And this is one of those things that you'll see this tactic come up all the time. And one of the things that we've noticed here, and one of the important reasons it is for us to all unite together, is because the same tactics are being employed here in Champaign that NAGA has noticed across the entire nation. And the first step is misinformation. It's confusion. It's bringing in people who aren't from the community, who don't fully understand the issues, trying to add confusion for the people who are in the community, who do understand the issues, trying to confuse those people. If that works pretty well. A lot of people are only familiar with the issue, or they don't know where to go to get information about the issue, and so confusion works for a lot of the people. But there are some of us, like those of us with the Honor of the Chief Society, who do know the full story. We do know the information. And then we become targets. Because then the next phase is violence. Shut down the people who are spreading the information that you don't want them to hear. And this is something that everyone up sitting at this table has faced, and probably a lot of you in this crowd have faced, and even a lot of you online have faced, because that violence doesn't just come in the form of, in-person violence. It's also, cyberbullying. It's coming at you over social media, trying to spread rumors about you and trying to spread false information about your personal life. It has no stop. And the reason that they want to escalate the violence is, Breland mentioned this earlier, their end goal is eradication. If everyone is afraid to stand up and speak the truth, then no one will do it. And they get their goal of completely wiping out any dissenting opinion that's possible. And that's what's really scary, and that's what we have to realize that we're fighting against. Because even though we might have a small number of people watching online or a small number of people in this room, it's important to realize what it is we're really fighting against. Because I feel like the numbers would be a lot larger if people really knew what these tactics were, how they've been employed nationwide, and how we can stop it from happening in our own community. And so in a way, Champaign is a very important battlefield in a much larger war. The war is against Native American names and images and the people who support them, and the end goal is a complete eradication. And we'll talk about some of the other communities where we've seen this play out. Here in Champaign, we have a battle. We once had a very strong connection to the Native culture and history of this state. We had Chief Illiniwek that served as a living symbol in front of a crowd of 64,000 people at Memorial Stadium, in front of a crowd of 16,000 people at our Assembly Hall, and spreading information through educational seminars and visits all across the state, even outside the state, as far away as presidential inaugurations throughout history. Even without that living symbol, we've still had the power of the chief symbol, which I see here in great representation in the crowd tonight. But you'll notice, even with the chief symbol gone, the U of I has made no efforts to replace it with any symbol of Native imagery. There's been no effort to put Native American imagery front and center in front of those large audiences in the athletic venues. And that speaks to their end goal of eradication. So I want to talk a little bit about this first step. It's misinformation, because you've all seen it. You're all likely to see it when you go home. You're likely to see it once the comments in this video get circled around on social media. You're likely to see some misinformation. It can come in a lot of forms. NAGA has faced this a lot. I think the most common time that I've seen it is with the name Redskins. I say that it's most common. They even got me on that. When I was a kid, I'd never really heard the name Redskins used all that much, and when I got older, I had people saying, "Oh, that's kind of considered like even a curse word. You shouldn't be allowed to say that." And I believed it. I said, "Wow, I never knew that. That's amazing. I had never heard I'd never heard that used as a racial slur, as a derogatory term. I'd never heard anyone use it that way." And lo and behold, it's because it really wasn't used that way until the past few years. It's one of those things where the original meaning was a term of pride or endearment. and it came to be misappropriated to be used in a different way. It's almost like if in 200 years people are saying, you hear these kids saying yeet and YOLO, those are actually very offensive terms. You shouldn't say YOLO. It's deeply, deeply offensive. And maybe to some people it is, but the people who are offended by that, it's because they're misinformed. It's because they've been told that a word means something that it doesn't. And it comes to the same to our Chief Illiniwek tradition. When you hear people who are against Chief Illiniwek talk about Chief Illiniwek, they have to open up with, well, it was racist, or it's an appropriation, and they'll use those same terms, which actually kind of describe their actions. But they have to do that because they have to confuse you. They have to make you think that the chief tradition was something it's not. They have to make you think that the name Illinois and the name Fighting Illini come from origins that they didn't actually come from. And they'll try to confuse you with this misinformation. The sad thing about this is a lot of this information comes from the university directly, or if not the university directly, it comes from university professors. It comes from the Board of Education. It comes from the school board in these local high school communities. These are people who are supposed to be educating our communities. They're supposed to be educating our young minds. They're supposed to be educating students, and they're abusing their position as faculty members or as administrators to basically peddle opinion as fact. And when you look at some of the research like Breland's been working with, a lot of that research is just a very long blog post typed up in a format that makes it look like psychological research. But when you really dive into it, you'll find that it's there's not much substance to it. And what's unfortunate is a lot of people don't know where to go for that substance. They don't know where to go for the real information. And so I want to tell you, this is where you go. You need to talk to the Native American Guardians Association when you look at the nationwide struggle. And I encourage you to visit Honor the Chief Society as well. At least for Honor the Chief Society, for those visiting online, we're more focused on here in the Champaign community. But as I said, the battle that we fought is a similar battle that you've heard described time and time again. And when you take a look at things like our FAQs page, when you take a look at things like our history page, you'll notice that the way that we talk about our images and the things that we've talked about in the past, the battles that we've fought, are very similar to what's going on nationwide. And so I'll encourage you to share those resources and use them in your own community if you're not here in Champaign. Unfortunately, if that misinformation doesn't work, be ready for the second wave. If you do go to our website, if you do look over the FAQs page, congratulations, you are now educated. And you now find yourself in the same position that Eunice found herself in, is armed with information, you're ready to fight, and you're going to find yourself the target of attacks. And those attacks can come in many forms. They usually start, it's generally a pretty smooth transition from the misinformation over to the ad hominem. At first, they'll start calling Chief Illiniwek racist, and pretty soon, now you're a racist for supporting Chief Illiniwek. And it really smooth transitions from attacking your ideology to attacking you as a person. And if you're not out there looking for it, you might not even notice it happened. And pretty soon, it's not just attacking you as a person for your belief in the chief, but they're going after your personal life, they're going after your Facebook page, they'll write negative reviews about your business on Yelp. I mean, they pull every dirty trick in the book, and it's because they can't attack your arguments. It's because they don't have anything. Once you debunk their tenuous research that they've done, and once you've stood up and kind of barred yourself against their fear tactics where they call you a racist and you turn it back and you say, I'm not a racist. It's actually you that's kind of acting with the racist behaviors. Then they've got to start calling you names. They've got no ground to stand on. We've seen that here in the Champaign community in the homecoming parade with the blockade and the ensuing violence that occurred there, with 4 reports of injuries in the homecoming parade to the Champaign Police Department, but barely any coverage on that incident at all. We've seen that with some of the behaviors of the campus faculty, be they direct or indirect acts of violence directed not only at general members of the community, but especially members of our Native community who dare stand up and question the narrative that they're trying to push. The important thing in that is information will arm you, but as you start to learn to walk around with the burden of knowledge and kind of this target on your back, inquire and expose. When you see these tactics implemented, really press these people. Make it obvious to everyone in the community that they don't have any ground to stand on. Their entire hope is that once they call you a racist, you will back away and that you will stop supplying the truth to the people who desperately need to hear it. And so it's our duty as the bearers of that truth not to back down when we're pressed and not to let this ad hominem get the better of us. This is something that I really struggled with whenever I was the target of a lot of cyberbullying. Is, my first reaction was it made me want to quit, and it made me want to, stop standing up to these people and just, kind of retreat somewhere. But then I realized that's exactly where they do it, and if I stop, then they win, and that's exactly why I can't do that, and that's exactly why none of us can do that. It's our duty as the first step, as the first line of infantry in this battle, to make sure that that information does get out to the people who need to hear it. And the next time we have one of these videos, the next time we host one of these panels, our numbers can double, quadruple, and we can really start to get that solid foundation of people who are armed with the knowledge and not afraid to use it. And so I encourage you not only to seek that out, but also just make sure to expose the other side whenever you see them implementing these tactics that they do. Because the stakes are very, very high. And the reason it's important for us to stand our ground where we are now is, Breland said it, Eunice said it, the end goal of the other side is total eradication. And I'll give them this credit, they're organized. My dad always used to say you could get 50 Indians in a room and tell them, how do we approach the mascot issue? And you'd get 51 different opinions. And that's a low ball estimate. But the opposition, they're very organized because they have one singular goal, and it's nothing. It's complete eradication. No native names, no native imagery whatsoever, and nothing left. And Bree's absolutely right. Once we lose it, you don't get it back. You go to these communities that had names like the Redskins and names like the Braves, and you go and you see what those communities are like now. They do not have any connection to their native history or heritage. They didn't replace the names with something more accurate. They didn't replace the image with something more tasteful, because that's not their goal. They flaunt around compromise like it's some distant possibility, but once their work is done in those communities, they leave and they move on somewhere else. And we're starting to see that here in the Champaign community. We've lost the chief. What have we seen? Tony spoke to this in his intro. What's there in the stadium now at the 50-yard line? What do we have at the 50-yard line when the 3-and-1 is played? We don't have anything. In 2017, the chancellor used his unilateral power to ban the war chant. He said it wasn't a representative musical scale that represented Native peoples, but did we replace it with something? Did we replace it with a more authentic heartbeat-style drum beat? Did we replace it with Redbones, Come and Get Your Love, or some Robbie Robertson? No, we just don't have anything now. There is no intro to the football team. And that's something that we're starting to see here in the Champaign community. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that Eunice and Tony wanted to stop by here tonight, is to deliver us a bit of a warning. For those of us here in Champaign, we've started to see, it's been slow because the Chief Illinois tradition did have so much pride behind it. And we are supporting the Chief tradition with the work of the Honor of the Chief Society because we are proud of it. And we know this, but it's happened in other communities, and if it hasn't happened in some of those other communities, for those listening online, it will. Illinois still has nearly hundreds of communities that use Native names and images in some way, and we can take this warning. If we don't stop what's happening here in the Champaign community, they will come for the high schools that are across the state of Illinois. I know it already happened up in Maine West, but there's a lot of other high schools that they have to choose from, and it is very methodical. And so we just need to understand that this is their end goal, and we need to do something to protect it. So I encourage all of you to help us join the battle, whether it's sharing this video once it gets published on Facebook, whether it's making sure that you access that FAQs page or visit the website, whether it's reading through some of the research that's been done and you don't have to pour into it with as much detail as Bree has. Let her break it down for you, and then all you have to do is say, that research is full of it. Right, but as long as you have these basic tools and you understand the tactics, they've been employed here in Champaign the same as they've been employed in numerous communities. Understand where it usually comes from. It's usually coming from the educators themselves, and we really need to hold these academic institutions accountable for understanding the difference between opinion as fact. We need to hold these people accountable. When people come at you, understand that they need to be debating the issue with you, and they not debating people. And once we figure out how to kind of call them on their BS, so to speak, we'll really be empowered to fight back. And I think that's something that's very important that we all understand and that we all spread that information. Because even though our numbers might be small now, that's because it takes a lot of work sometimes to actually do your research and actually read into the issue, to learn about the real driving factors behind some of these issues that our communities face. And so, congratulations, we're the first to get there. We're the first that have been empowered with this information, and it hasn't been easy, but we haven't been shut down yet. And so for every one of us that keeps speaking when they try to shut us up, for every one of us that lets our opinion be known, whether it be by a social media post or simply by sharing the website or some of the topics that we've talked about today, that's the act of defiance that we really need. Because this battle will continue as long as there are those of us who are still speaking for the truth. This battle will continue as long as there are Native people who know where we came from and who don't want to see that lost to a generation that guides themselves with misinformation, violence, and eradication. So we need to stand against it. We appreciate you for your help. There's a lot of work left to be done, but if we understand this, then we can do it. So I thank you all for coming out tonight. I thank you for your continued support and dedication to the cause. Make sure to get out and spread the word. Let people know what we're doing. Let people know about our website. Let people know about what we're trying to get accomplished on social media. And as we continue to grow and spread the word, we'll be able to make sure that we preserve the names and images and history that mean so much to us and hopefully means something powerful to you as well.
Just to, I guess, share my point of view on, you were talking about a lot of the social media stuff. I've done that, sharing stuff with you and Breland and even the NAGA, and I personally feel like some of my stuff's being throttled by Facebook as far as I get a lot of the same people that I see in the room talking about it. And when it first started, I used to have friends and stuff that would be, they'd comment on it and post. And anymore, it seems like it's a lot of the same, where it's not branching out. So I would encourage people to actually talk about it and talk to people. Don't just hit the share, think that it's taken care of and you're doing your part. You've got to talk about it, or it's not getting out there.
For sure, yeah. That's, Facebook has this problem a lot where they work based on automated algorithms, right? So they're going to give the information out there to the people that they think want to see it, right? And unfortunately, that means that a lot of what gets posted doesn't go outside this room, because they see that, you interacted with this group in the past, and so you're likely to continue to interact with this group, and so we're only going to show you this. So it really does. The challenge is, how do we escalate this from a local issue to the national issue that it really is? And it's definitely an uphill climb, but you're absolutely right. That starts with us. That starts with us and how we present this issue, and standing as allies when we see this issue approach somewhere else. The other side wins when they see Chief Illiniwek as a local issue dealt only by people in Champaign and nowhere else. We win when we start to say, the battle that we face to preserve the Chief Illinois tradition is going to be the same battle that the Tuscola Warriors will encounter when someone comes after our community just south. It's going to be the same battle as they faced in Maine and Idaho and all of these communities across the nation. And so when we start to band together, when the Native American Guardians Association is working with some of these local community organizations, whenever you say, I stand with the Redskins because I stand with Chief Illinois. When you say, I stand with the Braves because I stand with the Chief, that's where we really start to leverage our numbers. Because as Eunice pointed out, they've done poll after poll after poll, and we know the general community is with us. Even in Champaign, 78% of the student body voted in support of Chief Illinois. When the Washington Redskins does their polls about how Native people feel about it, they feel proud. And how many of them feel proud? Well, it's somewhere around 90% is usually where those numbers hover. So we've got the numbers. How do we use them? And the second that we stop fighting battles and start fighting the war is where we're really going to achieve a turning point, and we're really going to start to win. And so hopefully, as we start to collect this information and learn how to fight back against some of the, frankly, violent tactics that the other side implements, that's the moment where we're really going to start to win.
Like I said previously, my involvement in this whole thing started back in 2015 after my auto accident, and wanting to try to figure out a way to solve this for our fans. So I'm one of you. I mean, we all started at the same place. I'm pro Chief, grew up going to the games, loved it when the Chief came out. It was an event, and have that taken away, it's just been awful. And but I knew what I think probably a lot of us know deep down is that as long as things keep being the old pro-chief, anti-chief, going back and forth and so forth, we lose. Okay? So something has to change in order for us to win. So I didn't know. I wanted to figure out how to figure this out. I didn't know where to begin, but I just knew that probably the right thing was bringing in the Illini tribe, educating people about it, our history. So I set up a nonprofit organization called Illinois Pride USA. We put a website together educating people about the Illini Confederation, the original Illinois tribes. In June of 2015, I went down to the Peoria Tribe powwow. And then that's where I really got a vision of seeing that authentic culture and what that would look like coming up here. So in July of that year, I went to vacation in Branson, Missouri, which isn't that far from the Peoria tribe as it would happen to be. But so we went down to the tribe office, and I just showed up, and I was able to speak with Logan Pappenfort, who's now the deputy chief of the Peoria tribe. And I explained to him my vision of how cool it would be to bring their culture to Champaign. And we talked about Native imagery and so forth, and he was very supportive of, positive Native American imagery. So in August of that year, I got hold of a lady named Rachel Lloyd. She's with Northeast Oklahoma University, which is right near the Miami, where the Peoria tribe is. And I told her of my idea to have a group of Peoria tribe students come up and do a powwow event in the Grange Grove prior to the homecoming game that year. And she thought that was a fantastic idea because they had a number of Peoria students who went to Northeast Oklahoma who they just had that heritage scholarship come available at the U of I, and they couldn't get any Peoria kids to come up here and even check out the U of I. So when she threw that out to the kids to come up here and dance and go to a football game, it was overwhelming. The kids wanted to do it. And so she talked to Chief Roman, the chief at the time, and he thought it was a great thing. So we were working to get that going back in 2015, and the problem we ran into is we had the dancers to come, but we didn't have the singers, the drummers to accompany them. So we decided that it was a great idea, and we would shoot for it again in 2016. So 2016 comes around, and I get a hold of her, And by that time, I had had a different spin on it. I had thought about, well, what would it look like if we had the powwow dancers, outside the stadium, doing all that? And then I got to thinking, well, what would it look like if we put those same powwow dancers on the field? And then I got to thinking even further, well, what would it look like if we had those same dancers during the 3-in-1? I was like, so I started choreographing it, putting it together. And the best I could do is just put it on paper and explain it to people. And people were, oh, okay, that might be pretty cool and so forth. So anyway, so in 2016, we reach out to Rachel Lloyd to try to get this thing going again. But this time I say, hey, we don't want to be in Grange Grove. We want to be on the field at halftime. And she was like, okay, well, as long as Chief Froman's okay with it, we'll do it. Well, we send the proposal to Chief Froman, and as soon as he hears halftime, he blows a gasket, and he throws cold water on the whole thing, and so we ended up not doing it. So by this time, I had been in contact with the Council of the Chiefs and some of the other groups and told them about the general concept, and everybody jumped on it. And then in 2017, we were dead in the water with the Peoria tribe because Chief Froman was still there. So by that time, because of this journey, I was doing all of my research. I put out a blog, and I was constantly researching, like, well, is there anything that Phyllis Wise has said about the need for authentic culture and so forth, Native American at the U? Yes, and Rosenstein and everybody else, and I'm like nailing them. They were all saying that this is exactly what we need. And so I Googled Barb Wilson to see if she had said anything about it. And somehow out of that Google, I came across this organization called the Native American Guardians Association. I was like, what is this? I'm starting to read some of their stuff, and I was like, wow, they're where I'm at. So I get a hold of them, and then ultimately I end up talking to Eunice, and that's how I discovered NAGA. That's how I came to NAGA, and that's how Illini Nation knows about NAGA. So that's kind of the history of it. So in 2017, we brought some of the Dakota Sioux people down, and we did our little powwow. And for a lot of people, they say that was a watershed moment that we introduced, Native American culture, powwow culture, to the University of Illinois. So we've been kind of doing the do-si-do with the chancellor the last 3 years, not just myself, but some other, former chiefs and different people, and basically getting the same response from the chancellor, no. And even a compromise situation, no, he wants no part of it. I was in a meeting with him, and I laid all this out, and he said that I would do it if there wasn't a chief history. So in the chancellor's mind, the chief history is all bad. Well, he needs to go to a game sometime and hear how many people yell chief, right? So he's around the people in the ivory towers and elitist academia, hearing that and probably forming his opinion based upon that, when we know it's overwhelmingly, on our side. But he said, I'd be okay with it if you did like your powwow thing, like at the Cranard Center or something like that. And I'm thinking, no, that's segregation. How is this any different than Negro League players being told, no, you can't be on the big stage of Major League Baseball. You've got to be relegated to the Negro Leagues. So the way that this is shaping up is that we're going to seize the moral high ground. Because how can you argue against honoring your Native American heritage with authentic Native American culture? It's easy for them to beat up the chief. How do you beat up Native Americans getting out there doing their authentic culture? And the thing that I realized that I didn't know going into it is that these cultural performances at sporting events have become very commonplace, especially over the last 10 years. I'm talking high school, Major League Baseball, the NFL, NBA, the NCAA event. You will see Native American powwow teams coming on the field and presenting their culture. And the thing about it is, it doesn't violate any NCAA policy. In fact, for the last several years, the University of Tennessee, their Native American Student Association has sponsored their local Cherokee tribes to come on the field with the Pride of the Southland band and do a tribute during Native American Heritage Month, okay? So it is something that is very mainstream and that allows us to take the moral high ground. Now, in January of this past year, I went down to Quapaw, Oklahoma, and I've got a friend who's an enrolled member of the Peoria tribe, and he's also the first student from the Peoria tribe to be a student at the University of Illinois through online. And he organized some local talent to put together what I call a halftime tribute called the Unity Celebration. And we had different intertribal people participate, and 8 of the participants were actually descendants or some ancestry of the Peoria tribe. So we videotaped it and we put it online. I don't know, some of you may or may not have seen it, but we'll show it here in a second. But it starts with a typical grand entry where you have the military veterans lead the dancers, and then we do an intertribal dance, and then we move into the 3-in-1. And through this process, I discovered a lot of things. Number one, I figured out, a lot of people don't know what Fighting Illini even means. And I think a lot of people know that it's an allusion to the World War I veterans, and that's very much true. But during the stadium campaign, if you look at the publications promoting the stadium campaign, it is crystal clear. They tied the Native Illini to that entire campaign. And we put together a video in response to Jay Rosenstein and whose honor, ? We did a documentary called In Their Honor, ! And you can see that online. And the subtitle is The Origins and Meaning of Fighting Illini and the Incomparable 3-in-1 Tradition. So the next time you watch the 3-in-1, it has a meaning, okay? And I'm gonna tell you what it is. When they play the first medley, The Pride of the Illini, it starts out, we are fighting for dear old Illini, for the men who are fighting for you. So the men who are fighting for you is an allusion to the veterans. So it's a tribute song to the veterans. So when you see the military component of this, it's an honor to the military veterans. So Fighting Illini is an allusion to the military veterans, but it is undeniable that the Native Illini were tied to Fighting Illini athletics, not to the name specifically. So then you move to the March of the Illini, where they have that drum beat, dun, dun, dun. That was done to acknowledge the Native American heritage that was on campus. And the only Native American heritage on campus prior to Chief Illiniwek, when that song was composed, was the imagery during the stadium campaign of the Native Illini tribe. So that is a tribute to the Native Illini tribes, the March of the Illini. And then of course you have Hail to the Orange, the alma mater, which is a tribute to the University of Illinois. So when we put this together and you see the veterans coming out, the Native American dancers out, the raising of the hands, the students coming out with their national flag, it's the defining 3 within the 3-in-1. The 3-in-1 tells the story of who we are as the Fighting Illini. We honor our veterans, we honor our Native Illini tribes, and we honor the university. And that's what we tried to capture with this.
So, do you want to do like a question and answer thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry you guys have a cold, I
I don't know.
I gotta get my big mouth going again. As Alex said, and he is absolutely right, battles. You don't want to keep fighting battles. From 2007 till 2012, the Sioux of North Dakota won every battle, but they lost the war, because the war is against the university system and not against the Native Americans. They got a state law passed keeping, if it's on the record, keeping the Fighting Sioux name and everything, only to have the education system go behind back doors and get it repealed 9 months later. Your question about racism. I'm sure you all know some of the college kids. The universities are promoting white privilege, white racism. Every white person is a racist. That's coming from the education system. And it started in 1996, but it was working up to it before that. When Breland was talking about Stephanie Freiberg, you look at her dissertation paper, the 3 professors that taught her step by step how to do this, they didn't sign it. They got their names on there, but they didn't sign it because they wouldn't stand behind it. And at the same time, there was Angela LaRock at the University of North Dakota. She got 33 Native students and 36 white students. The college had over 13,000 students there. They had over 400 Native Americans there. She picks out 33 Native Americans. Only a couple of them are Sioux at that. But she writes up using the same exact identical stuff that Freiberg did. This was a planned thing. The APA, the Office of Civil Rights Education Division, the NCAA, and the university system, they all worked together from '96 to create that 2005 NCAA Executive Committee policy. And in 2007, the vice president of the NCAA said the Sioux people, after they signed a settlement, the Sioux people and no one else will decide how their name should and will be used. But then he refused to hear them. Their tribal chairman even sent him a letter in 2011 requesting a seat at the table when discussing the Fighting Sioux issue. And they said, no, it's up to the university. And the university said it's up to the Sioux, or up to the NCAA. They got to catch 22. They blame one and the other one keep it back and forth, so neither one has to really take the blame. But white professors are teaching hate. And the white culture right now, I'm not a racist, and there ain't anybody that's going to call me a racist. But that is what they're teaching. So it's all coming from the education system. And if we don't unite, we will lose. One by one, by one, by one. That's what they're doing. So it's, right now we're here because we support the Illini. But we supported Papa Michigan Redskins. We supported the Driggs Redskins. We supported the Cedar City Redmen. We supported the Skowhegan Redskins. We're in this for the whole battle, but we need everyone to be united with us. And yeah, as I said, we need to get more information out there. And as he suggested, a white paper, that's a good one to start. This is what they're saying, this is what the facts are. But now I'll shut up again.
Okay, I apologize, I have a cold. Once I start coughing, I can't stop it. But anyway, does anyone have any questions? We like to have questions from anybody, it doesn't matter, yeah.
You talked about your cousin, you had the argument with, what, 10 or 15 years ago? What's his view on it nowadays?
So he's still against. He was there at the time. There were actually 3 of my cousins who attended the university at the time where the chief controversy was really going. And at first we had 2 against and 1 neutral. And Geronimo is still against. Till is still neutral, but Ty has been converted. And then we had another one. What's that? Oh, actually, I guess I shouldn't say that too loud because they might go after him. It was funny. I had another cousin who came up, and he actually called this. It was funny. We make fun of him. He's not always right about things, but he was really right on about this. This was a discussion we had back in 2010, and my cousin and I had just come out of a class. I was a freshman, and he said, they bring up the term racism a lot. And he goes, that really worries me. He goes, because pretty soon people are going to use the word racist so often, it's going to lose all meaning. And they're just going to toss it out, and it's going to distract us from the real racial issues that our people face. And the word's going to lose all meaning. And if they keep using it for stuff like the chief, then people are going to forget what it means. And he was right. So I got to give my cousin some credit. And that's it's sad that they have to escalate it all of a sudden to go straight to that point. But it's something that Eunice touched on this. It's something that's very much being taught. This strategy, it's not something that's come about naturally. It's these educators that get these students in here. And that was something that one of the reasons that my cousin has the opinions that he does is because they got him in an impressionable time. He came in as a freshman and really ate it up, and they gave him that sense. They told him he came to U of I for an education, and he thought he was getting one. And how many students fall into that same situation? And it happened to the young Native people in North Dakota. It's happened to a lot of young Native people here at the University of Illinois. And I think what really it comes down to is we have to ask ourselves, where is this information coming from? And if it's coming from our educators who are abusing their positions, then we need to demand better.
Come on, you gotta have some more.
It's an indoctrination, it's not an education.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the exact right term. It's indoctrination, not education. That's why our kids can't read or write after they graduate high school.
Another thing that we found out that doing all our research, we've had over 2,000 public high schools in the United States that have had to get rid of their name and image. That's a lot. Yeah, since 2014, we've lost a few more. And even the Indian tribes, some of the Indian tribes in Oregon have had to get rid of their name and image. And they're federally recognized, but they were threatened by the state board in Oregon. If they didn't do it, they would lose their funding. So that just goes to show you how the magnitude that this thing is at. And that's why I started with this thing, because I think, to me, I feel really bad and I feel sad because I think they're going to cause genocide of our culture. And that's really sad. And, I've been told by many people that's how they do it. You get rid of everything to begin with, so you forget about it. So anyway, well, if there's nobody else has any questions, you open? Okay.
Just like the history of the Civil War and everything else, they're trying to eradicate that.
It's all
Not teaching-
interconnected.
Not
Yeah.
teaching history in school or anything else.
Yeah. Well, this might be kind of a summary thing, but thanks to everyone to come out. If there's an ask, is we need everybody to get involved. What's going to come out is probably going to come out next month, and it's going to change the debate. Nothing's going to change if it's still the same debate going back and forth, okay? It's going to be something different. So I'm not at liberty to say a whole lot other than the chancellor's, the recommendation from that panel was basically no Native American imagery, nothing. There's a ban on Native American imagery and culture at the University of Illinois. And I want you to think about this and think about it real hard. The University of Illinois at this moment is the first and only institution of higher learning that bans a culture from select campus venues. That should shock and outrage everyone. It's discrimination. It's taken us back to an era of Indian removal and Jim Crow segregation. The chancellor says, okay, you can have the culture over at the Crayon Arts Center, but you can't be on the big league stage. That's discrimination, that's segregation. We must seize the moral high ground and fight this battle. And it's going to take all of the Illini Nation. It's going to come out next month. The final charge from the Chancellor's Commission was, how do we partner with and honor the tribes from which Illinois is their ancestral home? And I'll just say this very broadly. We are getting the support of several of those tribes, okay? And with that, we seize the moral high ground. And when this comes out, we're going to need all of the Illini Nation pulling on the same rope, okay? And that's going to be meaning probably signing petitions, sending emails. There may have to be some kind of protest at the games, maybe wearing an armband, a black armband, in defiance of the ban on Native American culture at the University of Illinois. I know I'm going to be at every game. Charlene Teeter started the protest, right? 1980 something or so forth. I guarantee you, I don't know if I'll be the only one, maybe Breland, I don't know who else. They're going to get protested. And I've already got my sign and it says Indian removal is racism. And I'm going to be standing outside that stadium every game until the color barrier is broken at the University of Illinois. We're going to make this a civil rights issue. We're getting politicians involved. We are getting tribes involved. We're getting other ethnic organizations like the Coalition of African American Pastors on board with us. We're doing the same thing that their side did. And I hear it all the time. I hear it on the radio. They're a small minority, but boy, they sure are vocal and so forth. Well, what if our overwhelming majority becomes vocal? See, that's what the calculation at the University of Illinois is that Rosenstein and those guys will hoot and holler and they get their way. They protest and all that. Our side, we just kind of stay kind of neutral, we bitch a little bit on Facebook, but we don't get out there and protest. We don't vocally express, even though we are the overwhelming majority, we get ramrodded by them. And I know for a fact that is the thinking with the trustees and the chancellor, that they'll put some new kind of tradition in, some mascot or something, and we'll complain about it and so forth, but eventually we'll accept it, and then our generations will die off and so forth. We have to put a marker down, and we have to say, no. Fighting Illini is Native American. We will not accept anything other than a Native American identity, and we have to be united in this. It's going to take the overwhelming force of the Illini Nation to bring this to pass. So I need each one of you to ask yourselves, what can I do? Some of us are going to be out there holding protest signs. Some of us are going to be organizing the next powwow event.
And that may include, before on a Friday, going outside the chancellor's office and protesting his segregationist ban on Native American culture. Whatever it takes, that's what we're going to do. And we're not going to do it once. Their side is relentless, okay? We have to be every bit as relentless. And we need money. It's going to take money to do this. So if you're in a position to do it, to help NAGA with this, or if you know people that might be, we need people to step up. The battle is coming down, and it's probably going to ignite next month, and we're just going to keep carrying it through. This is the final battleground, and we have to make a stand that we're going to, as an overwhelming majority of Fighting Illini Nation, say we demand Native American culture and imagery at Fighting Illini Athletics.
You need news coverage. You need the news coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as promised, you got 4 Indians up here, and you heard about 5 different perspectives. But I think the important thing to mention is no matter who you identify with or who you agree with here, whose perspective that really resonates with you, the important thing to recognize is all paths forward have the same enemies and are going to require the same tactics. Regardless of whether we're trying to get more authentic imagery or if you're wanting to get the chief back, neither of those things are going to happen if we don't fight for some form of Native representation at halftime. Neither of those are going to happen if we don't do something to get out in the media, to get on the news, and to fight against the decree that the Chancellor has made. So just to give one final thought here for me, in the spirit of unity, there's a lot of different perspectives. There's a lot of different people who are stakeholders in this event, whether you went to U of I yourself or whether you're just a community member, a fan. We all want, or you're watching from out of state, we all want the same thing. And that's some form of positive Native American representation. So we need to unite together so that we can get that and save that.
And I want to expand on what Tony said. He was talking about finances. We need help financially. NAGA is now selling our book, Aren't We Suing Up? And for anyone that wants to buy a copy for $20, my wife will sign it, whether she wants to or not.
How about t-shirts and stuff?
I just sent Maria a text message saying, can we get shirts with the continuing the tradition logo and say Indian removal is racism and everybody wear them to the games this year.
That'd be awesome.
And also, we keep talking about fiber. Has there ever been thought to someone doing a study or funding a study to repudiate that? Because the best way.
You should say that.
Yes.
That's
what we were in Washington DC for, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we were working on that and the lawsuit. But you guys remember now, you're hearing it from me, I'm David here. You have 90% of us in this country who want these kept. We have grown, we have been traveling, and I'm telling you, it's no lie, no matter what the fake news tells you. And it's just look at these polls. And most of these polls, we have Republicans, we have liberals, we have conservatives, we have Democrats. We have so many people listening regardless of what affiliation you are. But these polls aren't done, most people are liberals. I think they're having trouble even skewing the numbers because they are so high. They just can't. So it is true, and I know from my reservation, I know people want these kept.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you guys for coming out. Thank you, appreciate it.
We're going to go grab some books for anybody that wants.
If you guys want to sign books, just let me know.
I do.
I ordered 40 for drinks, and I think I only have about 8 left.
This, did you